Imagine, if you can, stepping into a jungle so vast, so untamed, it swallows you whole. In 2017, 5 young explorers ventured into Cambodia's Ratanakiri wilderness, chasing a lost Khmer temple. They vanished, leaving no trace, until 6 years later, when one stumbled out, a broken shadow of a man, unable to speak, his body scarred with secrets. What horror could erase 6 years of a life, leaving only silence? Welcome to the Crime O'Clock, where we unravel the darkest mysteries. Today, we dive into a story that will chill you to the core. Before we begin, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell to join the Crime O'Clock community, your home for gripping true crime and unsolved mysteries. In the comments, tell us, what do you think could make 5 people disappear without a trace? Share your theories, and let's unravel this mystery together. In the spring of 2017, 5 dreamers from across the globe came together with a singular, audacious goal: to uncover a lost Khmer temple hidden deep in the untamed wilderness of Cambodia's Ratanakiri province. This wasn't a casual hike or a tourist jaunt. This was an expedition into one of the most remote corners of the world, a place where dense jungles, treacherous swamps, and towering cliffs guard secrets older than time itself. The team was no ragtag group of amateurs. They were meticulous, driven, and bonded by a shared hunger for discovery. Let me introduce them. Lucas Harper, 34, was the leader, a former British soldier with a weathered face and a steady hand. He'd trekked through deserts and mountains, from the Sahara to the Andes, and his calm under pressure made him the group's anchor. Logistics and safety were his domain, and he mapped their route with military precision. Then there was Amara, 28, a medic from India with a quiet strength. She trained in emergency response, and her first aid kit was a masterpiece: antidotes for snake venom, remedies for tropical fevers, bandages for every scenario. Amara was the one they trusted to keep them alive. Noah Cohen, 26, was the tech wizard, a Canadian with a backpack full of gadgets. GPS trackers, a satellite phone, cameras, even a drone. He had it all, wired to capture every moment of their journey. His enthusiasm was infectious, always tinkering, always planning for the worst. Lila Moreau, 30, a French historian, was the heart of the mission. She'd spent years studying ancient Khmer texts, chasing whispers of a nameless temple known only through tribal legends. Her passion for history lit up the group, and her dream of finding this temple was what brought them together. Finally, there was Caleb Evans, 25, an American documentary filmmaker with a knack for storytelling. His camera was their window to the world, meant to immortalize their triumph. For nearly a year, they prepared with relentless focus. They pored over old French colonial maps, cross-referenced satellite images, and consulted with jungle survival experts. They invested in the best gear: water filters to purify murky streams, 3 weeks' worth of dehydrated meals, signal flares for emergencies, and a satellite phone with extra batteries. This wasn't a reckless adventure. They were a well-oiled machine, ready to face the wilderness. Their plan was straightforward but daunting. They drive a rented SUV to the last village in Ratanakiri, a speck on the map called Ban Lung. From there, they trek 60 kilometers through uncharted jungle, navigating by compass and instinct. The round trip was expected to take 2 weeks, with check-ins every 48 hours via satellite phone. On a humid morning in June 2017, they set out, their SUV rattling along dirt roads until civilization faded behind them. At Ban Lung, they parked, shouldered their packs, and stepped into the jungle. The first 3 days were grueling but exhilarating. Through the satellite phone, they sent brief updates to their families. "All good," Lucas wrote on day 1. "Jungle's intense, but we're on track," Amara added on day 2, attaching a photo of the group, sweaty, smiling, vines curling around them like a living cage. Noah's message on day 3 was upbeat but cautious. "This place is unreal, like stepping into another world." They were tired but alive, their spirits high as they pushed deeper into the wilderness. The jungle was unlike anything they'd imagined. Towering trees blocked out the sun, their roots twisting like ancient serpents. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of damp earth and decay. Insects buzzed in relentless clouds, and the distant calls of unseen creatures echoed through the canopy. Lila scribbled in her journal about the temple, convinced they were close. Caleb filmed every step, his lens capturing the group's laughter, their struggles, their fleeting moments of awe. They were a team, united, chasing a dream. But the jungle was watching, and it was patient. On the third day, Noah sent one final message. Signals fading. We're dropping into a low-lying area. Next check-in when we hit higher ground in 2 days. Keep the faith. That was the last anyone heard from them. 3 days passed. Then 4. The silence from the group stretched into a void that swallowed hope. Their families, scattered across continents, waited by their phones, refreshing inboxes, clinging to the promise of that next check-in. By day 5, worry turned to dread. Lucas's sister, Emma, was the first to sound the alarm, contacting the Cambodian embassy in London. They're prepared, she told herself. They have the gear, the plans. But deep down, she felt a gnawing fear. A week after the last message, it was clear something was terribly wrong. The Cambodian authorities acted swiftly, launching a search operation that drew international attention. Military units trained in jungle warfare were deployed, joined by volunteers from the explorers' home countries, friends, colleagues, even strangers moved by their story. Helicopters buzzed over Ratanakiri, their blades slicing through the humid air. But from above, the jungle was an endless sea of green, a canopy so dense it hid everything beneath. On foot, the search was even more brutal. Rescuers hacked through vines with machetes, waded through swamps, and battled heat that clung like a second skin. Mosquitoes swarmed, and snakes slithered in the undergrowth. One volunteer described it as searching for a whisper in a storm. 12 days into the operation, a breakthrough came, or so they thought. A search team stumbled across the group's last campsite, about 20 kilometers from where Noah's final message was sent. The scene was both hopeful and unnerving. 3 tents stood intact, their zippers still closed. A cold campfire sat nearby, surrounded by scattered metal bowls and mugs, as if the group had paused mid-meal. Inside the tents, sleeping bags lay neatly rolled, alongside personal items. A dog-eared book Lila was reading, a toothbrush Amara swore by, a spare battery for Noah's drone. It looked like they'd stepped away, expecting to return in minutes. But the camp told a darker story. The most critical supplies were gone: backpacks, the satellite phone, GPS trackers, Amara's first aid kit, Lucas's machete, and nearly all their food. There was no blood, no torn fabric, no claw marks from a predator, no signs of a struggle at all. It was as if the 5 had simply dissolved into the jungle. The rescuers stood in silence, the weight of the discovery sinking in. Where were they? And why abandon their camp? Investigators scrambled for answers, piecing together theories. The first was obvious. They'd gotten lost. But Lucas was too skilled a navigator, and the group had multiple GPS devices. Besides, why leave their tents and personal belongings behind? An attack seemed plausible, but by whom? Ratanakiri had no active guerrilla groups, and the local tribes, rare and reclusive, were known for avoiding outsiders. Poachers or smugglers might have crossed their path, but an ambush would have left chaos, blood, bullet casings, footprints. There was nothing. A predator, perhaps a tiger or a leopard, was considered, but no animal would take 5 people and their gear without a trace. The jungle was mocking them, offering questions but no answers. The search dragged on for weeks. Helicopters swept the canopy. Teams combed dozens of square kilometers. Families held vigils. Emma, Lucas's sister, flew to Cambodia, pleading with authorities to keep going. But Ratanakiri was vast, untamed, a labyrinth where even the best trackers faltered. After a month, the active search was scaled back. The case was labeled an accident. The 5 explorers declared missing, presumed dead. Their families mourned, lighting candles, sharing stories of their loved ones' dreams. The world moved on, and the jungle kept it secret. Years passed, 1, 2, 5. The story faded into a footnote, another cautionary tale of adventure gone wrong. Until 2023, when the impossible happened. What do you think happened to Lucas, Amara, Noah, Lila, and Caleb? Were they lost in the jungle's depths, taken by an unseen force, or something stranger? Drop your theories in the comments below, and let's piece this puzzle together. On a sweltering afternoon in July 2023, a Cambodian highway near Phnom Penh buzzed with the chaos of motorbikes and trucks. Amid the noise, a figure shuffled along the roadside, unnoticed at first. He was barefoot, his clothes reduced to tattered rags, his body a skeleton draped in dirt-caked skin. A thick, matted beard hid his face, and his hair hung in clumps, tangled with leaves. His eyes stared blankly ahead, unseeing, as if the world around him was a ghost. A passing police patrol spotted him, assuming he was just another drifter, lost to the streets. They took him to a hospital, expecting a routine case of dehydration or mental illness. But this was no ordinary man. This was Caleb Evans, the filmmaker who vanished with his team 6 years earlier. At the hospital, nurses cleaned him up, revealing a map of suffering etched into his body. His back, arms, and legs were crisscrossed with scars, some faded, others fresher, left by a blunt, heavy object, perhaps a stick or a whip woven from jungle vines. His wrists and ankles bore ring-shaped marks, as if he'd been bound for months, maybe years. His knees and ankles were worn down, the joints grinding like those of an elderly man, suggesting endless treks over brutal terrain or grueling labor. Tests showed no traces of modern food, no processed sugars, no chemicals from packaged meals. His diet had been roots, leaves, perhaps raw meat. For years, his teeth were stained, unbrushed for half a decade. His skin held no residue of soap or shampoo, as if civilization had never touched him. The most chilling discovery was his mind. Caleb didn't speak, not a word, not a sound. He didn't respond to his name, to English, or to any language. Psychologists diagnosed severe dissociative amnesia, a condition where trauma locks away memories, sometimes forever. He didn't recognize himself in a mirror, his reflection a stranger. When shown photos of his family, his parents, his sister Emma, or his expedition mates, his face remained blank, his eyes empty. At night, nurses heard him make strange, guttural clicks, like the cries of a nocturnal bird, sounds that sent shivers down their spines. He rocked back and forth on his bed, lost in a world no one could reach. The hospital staff had no idea who he was at first. He carried no ID, no clues to his past. They called him the Silent Man, a tragic figure destined for an anonymous ward. But a young intern, an avid reader of missing persons cases, felt a spark of recognition. Something about Caleb's hollow eyes, even beneath the beard, tugged at her memory. She dug through archives, flipping through reports of disappearances from the last decade. Then she found it, a 2017 file on 5 missing explorers, including a photo of Caleb, smiling, clean-shaven, full of life. The resemblance was uncanny. She alerted the authorities, and a DNA test was rushed to an international database. Weeks later, the results came back, a 100% match. The Silent Man was Caleb Evans. The news sent shockwaves through the families. Emma, now 32, flew to Phnom Penh, her heart torn between relief and horror. She'd mourned Caleb, held a memorial, let him go. Now he was back, but not the brother she knew. She sat by his hospital bed, holding his hand, whispering stories of their childhood, bike rides, late-night movies, his dream of making films that mattered. Caleb stared through her, his fingers limp in hers. Emma vowed to find answers, not just for Caleb, but for Lucas, Amara, Noah, and Lila. Where had he been? What had he endured? And why was he the only one to return? The investigation, dormant for years, roared back to life. Caleb was their only witness, but his silence was a wall. Doctors and detectives watched him closely, searching for any clue, a gesture, a glance, a sound, that might unlock the mystery of those 6 lost years. What they found was a man stripped of his humanity, a living ghost carrying a secret too heavy to speak. The jungle had returned him, but it had kept his soul. Caleb's presence in the hospital was like a puzzle with missing pieces. Investigators and psychologists surrounded him, desperate to pry open his mind, but he was a fortress of silence. They studied his every move, hoping his body would speak where his voice could not. In those first weeks, Caleb's behavior was more animal than human. He flinched at sudden noises, a door slamming, a tray dropping, but ignored the hum of city life outside his window. Car horns, sirens, the chatter of television meant nothing to him. He'd curl into a corner to sleep, dozing for 15-minute stretches, always alert, as if expecting danger. Open spaces terrified him. He'd press himself against walls when taken outside, his eyes darting to the sky with raw panic. His relationship with food was even stranger. At first, he refused hospital meals, staring at trays of rice and soup with suspicion. But when left alone, he'd snatch the food, shoving it into his mouth with trembling hands, hiding scraps under his mattress or in drawers. It was the instinct of someone who'd known starvation, who'd learned to hoard every morsel. Psychologists tried talk therapy, showing him photos of his old life, but he'd gaze at them blankly, as if they belonged to another man. Music and art therapy failed too, until one day, something shifted. After weeks of ignoring the supplies, Caleb picked up a piece of charcoal from an art therapy session. He began to draw on a sheet of paper, his movements jerky, almost frantic. At first, it was chaos, scribbles, jagged lines. But day after day, a pattern emerged. He drew the same image obsessively. A river splitting into a fork, a mountain with a sloped peak, a cluster of dots like trees or rocks. In the center, always, a crude cross, etched with such force it tore the paper. It wasn't art, it was a map, primitive, childlike, but deliberate. And sometimes, as he drew, he'd mutter those guttural clicks, his eyes distant, as if tracing a memory too deep to name. Investigators pounced on the drawings. They pulled satellite images of Ratanakiri, a province larger than some countries, and began the painstaking task of matching Caleb's sketch to real terrain. It was like finding a needle in a haystack, but after weeks of analysis, they found it. A remote valley, hemmed in by sheer cliffs, accessible only through a narrow, vine-choked crevice. The river fork, the sloped mountain, it was an exact match. That valley, overlooked in the 2017 search as impassable, became their new focus. But what did the cross mean? A camp? A grave? Or something darker? Something Caleb's broken mind couldn't articulate? Meanwhile, experts dug deeper into Caleb's condition. Linguists recorded his nighttime clicks, analyzing hours of audio. The sounds weren't random. They had structure, repetition, a rhythm that suggested communication. But it wasn't human language. Some theorized Caleb was mimicking animal calls, perhaps a survival tactic. Others believed he'd been taught a primitive code by someone, or something, in the jungle. They played him recordings of natural sounds to test his reactions. Rain and wind calmed him, but the cry of a rare Cambodian hornbill, a bird found only in the highlands, sent him into a frenzy. He'd cower, hands over his head, whimpering like a trapped animal. It was terror, pure and primal. An ethnobotanist joined the effort, examining Caleb's tattered rags and samples from his hair and nails. Under a microscope, they found spores of a rare fern and pollen from a flower that grew only on limestone cliffs above 500 meters, plants native to the very valley Caleb's map depicted. 3 clues now pointed to the same place: his drawings, his panic at the hornbill's cry, and the microscopic evidence on his body. Whatever had happened to Caleb and his friends, it had happened there, in that silent, isolated valley. Emma, Caleb's sister, watched the investigation unfold, her hope fading with each discovery. When detectives showed Caleb a map of the valley, his reaction was explosive. His breathing grew ragged, his eyes wild with terror. He backed away, slamming his head against the wall, his clicks rising into a desperate, animalistic wail. Doctors sedated him, but the message was clear. Caleb's body remembered what his mind could not. The valley held the answers, and the horror. What does Caleb's cross mean? A place he was held, the graves of his friends, or something worse that his mind locked away? Share your theories in the comments, and let's unravel this mystery together. With Caleb's map as their guide, the Cambodian authorities launched a new expedition in late 2023. But this was no ordinary rescue mission. It was a police operation, armed and deliberate, aimed at uncovering the truth in a place that seemed to defy it. The team was elite, Cambodian Special Forces soldiers trained for jungle warfare, a seasoned investigator from Phnom Penh, a doctor to handle any medical emergencies, and a local guide named Sovan, whose family had lived on the edge of Ratanakiri for generations. Sovan was no stranger to the jungle, but even he hesitated, his eyes shadowed with unease. His elders had warned against entering certain valleys, places where, they said, the ancestors fell silent, their spirits unwilling to linger. The team flew by helicopter to the base of a mountain range, where the jungle swallowed the horizon. Vehicles could go no further. The rest was on foot. For days, they trekked through a labyrinth of vines and mud, the air thick with humidity and the hum of unseen life. Sovan led the way, his machete carving a path, but his steps grew slower, his glances more frequent. He spoke of old stories, tales of a valley where the wind carried whispers that weren't human, where those who entered never returned whole. The soldiers, hardened and practical, dismissed his unease, but they gripped their rifles a little tighter. After 4 days, they reached the crevice, a narrow gash in a cliff face, choked with vines and jagged rocks. It was the only way into the valley Caleb's map had pinpointed. As they squeezed through, the jungle's cacophony faded. The valley was a different world, cloaked in an oppressive silence that pressed against their ears. No birds sang, no insects buzzed, only the faint rustle of wind through strange, gnarled trees and the distant murmur of water. The air felt heavy, like a held breath. Even Sovan, who'd faced leopards and storms, muttered under his breath, his hands tracing a gesture of protection. They followed the river from Caleb's drawing, its dark, stagnant waters splitting into a fork just as he'd sketched. Along its banks, they found signs that chilled them. Notches marred tree trunks, too precise to be natural, too crude to be modern tools. Vines were tied into traps, sharpened bamboo stakes hidden in the undergrowth, simple but lethal. Someone or something had claimed this valley and guarded it fiercely. The soldiers moved in formation, silent, their eyes scanning the shadows. Every step felt like an intrusion, a challenge to an unseen watcher. Hours later, they reached a clearing, and the sight stopped them cold. Scattered across the ground were dilapidated huts, cobbled together from branches, clay, and palm leaves. A long, cold fire pit stretched through the center, its ashes gray and lifeless. The settlement was abandoned, or so it seemed. The soldiers fanned out, searching the huts with methodical precision. In one, they found a plastic food container lid, its faded logo matching the ones the 2017 expedition had carried. In another, a scrap of bright blue nylon from a backpack was woven into a roof patch. A bent, blackened spoon lay discarded in the dirt, its handle worn smooth. These were the remnants of Lucas, Amara, Noah, Lila, and Caleb's world, repurposed by someone who'd stayed behind. The investigators' pulse quickened. This was proof the group had been here, but where were they now? The huts held no bodies, no recent signs of life. The team regrouped, studying Caleb's map again. The cross wasn't in the clearing. It was marked at the foot of a cliff, a short distance away. They moved toward it, the silence growing heavier, the air thick with anticipation. Sovan lagged behind, his face pale, whispering that the valley felt wrong, like a place where time itself had stopped. The soldiers pressed on, determined to find the truth, no matter what it cost. At the base of the cliff, the team found it, for small mounds arranged in a circle, each outlined with smooth river stones. They weren't natural formations, they were graves. The investigator's throat tightened as he gave the order to exhume them. The soldiers worked in silence, their shovels biting into the soft earth. In the first grave, they uncovered human remains, brittle and worn. Beside the bones lay a brass compass on a leather strap, its needle frozen. Lucas had never parted with it, a gift from his father. The second grave held a silver crescent moon medallion, Lila's keepsake from her father. The third and fourth revealed Amara's medical badge and Noah's cracked smartwatch. It screamed dark. All four were here. Lucas, Amara, Noah, Lila. Their journey ended in this silent valley. A forensic expert, part of the team, examined the remains on site. There were no bullet holes, no fractures from blows, no signs of sudden violence. But the bones told a grimmer story. Extreme malnutrition, scurvy, and diseases born of a diet unfit for human survival. These weren't quick deaths. They were slow, agonizing, stretching over years. The group hadn't been murdered. They'd wasted away, their bodies unable to endure the conditions they'd been forced into. But who had buried them? And why was Caleb, the youngest, the only one to walk away? Sovin, standing at the edge of the clearing, called the team over, his voice trembling. He pointed to the cliff face, where faint scratches marked the stone, high above reach. They weren't random. They formed a path, leading toward dense undergrowth. Following the marks, the team found a hidden entrance, a cave mouth veiled by vines. The air inside was damp, heavy with the scent of old smoke. In the corner lay a pile of animal skins and dried leaves, a makeshift bed. The walls were etched with strange symbols, like those on the trees outside, jagged and deliberate. And in the darkest corner, crouched low, was a man. He was old, his skin weathered like bark, his long gray hair and beard tangled with dirt. He wore scraps of animal hides, his eyes glinting with a strange, animal curiosity as they met the soldiers' flashlights. When they shouted commands in Khmer, he didn't flinch, didn't speak. Instead, he let out a soft, guttural click, the same sound Caleb had made in the hospital. The pieces fell into place. This wasn't a tribal elder or a lost soldier. He was a Cambodian man, once a monk, who'd fled to the jungle decades ago after a personal tragedy. Perhaps a family lost, a life shattered. Isolation had broken his mind, turning him into something less than human, a solitary creature ruling this valley. The team pieced together the horror. In 2017, Lucas's group, exhausted and likely lost after their equipment failed, had stumbled into this valley. Too weak to resist, they became captives of the monk, who saw them not as victims, but as companions, a twisted family for his lonely world. He fed them what he survived on, roots, larvae, raw meat scraped from small kills. He taught them his language of clicks and bird cries, punishing disobedience with blows from a vine whip, leaving scars like those on Caleb's body. Lucas, Amara, Noah, and Lila couldn't endure it. Their bodies, raised on modern diets, succumbed to disease and starvation, one by one. The monk buried them, perhaps out of some warped sense of care, marking their graves with stones. Caleb, the youngest and strongest, survived 6 years in this nightmare. He'd unlearned humanity, his mind retreating to a primal state to cope. His escape was likely a fluke. Perhaps the monk grew ill, his grip loosening, or Caleb, driven by instinct, fled through the crevice, wandering until he reached the highway. The monk didn't resist when the soldiers let him out. He was taken to Phnom Penh, declared insane, and confined to a psychiatric hospital, his mind too far gone for trial. The case was closed. The remains of the 4 returned to their families. Emma wept as she held Lucas's compass, a final piece of her brother. But for Caleb, there was no closure. Could Caleb have fought back, saved his friends, or was he too broken by the jungle's grip? What would you have done in his place? Share your thoughts in the comments, and let's reflect on this tragedy together. Caleb's story didn't end in that valley, but the man who returned wasn't a filmmaker who left. He was placed in a specialized nursing home, where he lives quietly, obediently, his days marked by routine. He eats from plates now, no longer hiding food, but his eyes remain empty, his soul tethered to a place no one can reach. Sometimes, sitting by a window, staring at the trees, he makes those guttural clicks, soft and haunting, as if calling to the jungle that claimed him. The doctors say his memory may never return, that the trauma carved too deep. Caleb Evans is home, safe among people, but a part of him lingers in that valley, where the spirits are silent. The monk, too, remains locked away, a relic of a life undone by solitude. His story is a shadow, a reminder of what isolation can do to a mind. Lucas, Amara, Noah, and Lila were laid to rest by their families, their dreams of discovery now memories. Emma keeps Lucas's compass on her desk, a talisman of the brother she lost. The jungle of Ratanakiri holds its secret still, its silence a warning to those who dare to chase its mysteries. This is the cost of adventure, the price of stepping into the unknown. Thank you for joining us on the Crime O'Clock for this haunting journey. If this story moved you, support our channel by visiting our Buy Me a Coffee link in the description. It helps us bring you more tales like this. Subscribe and hit the bell for more chilling mysteries. And tell us in the comments, what's the scariest jungle mystery you've ever heard? Until next time, stay curious and stay safe.